am I too hot?
It doesn't matter if your stuff's set up or not because we're going for it.
Okay. Well, no, I mean, am I too loud? Do I sound good?
You
So
always sound good to me. How you doing?
you know, the Chinese have a saying, it's actually a curse. May you live in interesting times.
Ah,
Oh, bless you, my child.
thank you. I'm
Bless you.
keeping that
Extra
in
please do.
there. That never
Yeah, please do.
happens. That's a lucky
So,
one.
well, there you go. So they have this thing where they,
Oh, it's
may
good when you start seeing stars.
those are the those are the best kind where you're like, holy crap, did I sneeze up a lung? You're like,
Well, I was watching, they're making a Jackass 4, the new Jackass they're all making a new one. And
oh my
they were
god,
bringing Johnny Knoxville in to talk about his worst incidents. And I remember
yeah,
driving, or not driving, riding in the car with my grandma. She lives like about an hour away. And they
yeah,
would turn on the radio and it was a guy playing Big Balls by AC/DC because that
yeah,
day Johnny Knoxville was in the hospital getting his testicles worked on he got hit by a bull in one of his movies.
yeah.
So I was listening to John Knoxville talk about all his worst incidents, and I guess apparently on Wild Boys or something, he had popped his eye out of his socket, and the doctor's like, "Don't sneeze for like 6 weeks." So then I guess someone told him a joke, and he went like, like to laugh like that, and he held his nose, and his eye popped right out, and
Uh,
he had to push it back in.
you just, I'm,
That came from a sneeze I just did. I can't believe I
I
thought of that.
know, and I'm just thinking to myself, curse you, Rob, curse you, because I'm one of these. I'm kind of phobic about hospitals and needles. Not phobic. They, I get a bit queasy. I don't know why. I've always been like, I'm not a big fan of like needles and things, which is funny because with this tattoo that I just got, one of the
Let me
one
see it.
person
Let me
that
see it.
didn't. I don't know if I can see it. So that's what it looks like right now. But I'll send you a link later because you can't really see it right now. But
You
it's
sent me a picture. I just wanted the audience to see this beautiful tat.
yeah.
Why
So
the
it's
microphone and the butterfly though?
um. See, this is where, and we can talk into this as well. The microphone is on the microphone. It says on the air, and what I wanted, uh, it's both a reminder to myself and the world that I'm still on the air after my heart attack. I'm not going anywhere. I'm still doing stuff, but it's also a reminder to me that I'm on the air all the time, meaning that you always have an audience. You are always being listened to. Someone always hears you, and whether you think they're like, you could be, someone is always listening, to all this. So you have to be careful about what you say sometimes, like if you want to,
Not on my show.
well, well, not what, what I mean is like when you're, see, how do you do this? Um, for me, I try not to offend people, or I try not to do like, but if you got to speak your mind, you got to get it out there, because for example, one of the unsung rules of voiceover work is when you're setting your rate, don't set it too low, because that becomes your rate forever. Like if you try and get another job and go, well, actually I'm worth this much, and they go, well, no, your last job you charged this, do you remember? So that's what you're worth. So if you don't,
That's what
you
you're
try not to,
worth. That's such a
yeah, but
weird
if
thing to
yeah,
say.
yeah, see, again, this is English, and all this when people, put monetary values on your jobs and what you're worth, and it comes back to your question, what defines you, where you get into that sort of, because if somebody defines themselves with their work, and then somebody can put a monetary value on that work. I know people who used to value people by how much money they had. Like, it was ridiculous. I used to say to them, really? Are you serious? And they go, well, yeah, of course. I mean, and this one woman actually said, well, yeah, of course. Like, if you have more money, you're a better person. And I just remember going, are you like, what? Where did that come from? Like the things that floor you, like that, what environment did this person grow up in where you get that type of thing? So
Well, that's just the
the whole thing
structure
of,
of how the world works. Is
yeah, so the whole thing about the microphone is, and with it, so being on the air, try to be as honest as you can to yourself and to other people, but let the world know that what you're worth inside, like where you're at, like, so get it out there, don't let people crap all over you, but at the same time, because when you're talking, and this is where you get into not the overly PC stuff for you, like, because these days you can offend anybody just by walking into a room kind of thing. So you have to be, I find that absolutely, it's rubbish. It's crap. But I I don't know why I can't explain this better. Basically, I just mean that when you're careful of what you're saying, meaning I guess the phrase would be read the room. Like if you walk in and you know that certain topics are going to offend certain people, then if you choose to talk about those things, well, then that's on you, kind of thing, you know. But you know that you've chosen to stir, you know, kick the beehive, kind of thing. But shows like this, for example, like even though we talk about lots and lots of different things, at no point have I ever watched any episode of Out of the Blank and Went, that episode was set out to, you know, troll somebody or, you know, set flames, you know, to this, because
Unless it's the
it's just people.
CCP, and I'm gonna come at you. I'm on
Let's
two
see.
lists. It's either the Clintons list or I'm on the CCP's list. So either way, if I get shot, just know that it was one of those two. I'm going to give you a fine line and a range. But yeah, there is a fine line between um, honesty, and then being an asshole. There's a
Yeah.
lot of people don't really know what that line is, but I think whatever you're really saying, and if you actually mean it, you can sense even by looking at someone's facial expressions, being able to recognize things that a person says or does. You'll be able to know if a person's bullshitting or if they actually feel this way. I actually talked about this in a podcast recently. Someone was telling me like, hey, like, you know, there's a large amount of like racism and stuff like that. I'm like, but how much do you come across? Like, I get it because like I'm a minority in my area. So if we can talk about the racism the other way, which is like just calling me white all the time, but these people aren't like, nobody is like, I haven't come across anybody that's inherently like murderous intent, like I'm going to kill you. I mean, I've been researching into the Charles Manson thing. There's a guy, I forgot his name. I think it's Robert.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. This person has come by. She is absolutely fascinated with with what's going on. I don't know. She saw your picture and she came in and she's like, "What?
He's got the
Who?"
bluest eyes I've ever seen.
Yeah. So she she may interrupt. I sorry I didn't. But yes, I mean that's the whole
Well, hold
thing. I
on. Let
mean
me
when you
get
can.
back to the thing
Yes,
before you
yes. I'm
interrupted
sorry.
me
I've
for
cut you off. Yeah.
Simon's cat that just came into the picture. But Tom O'Neill wrote a book about Charles Manson about how like he did a 15-year investigation finding out that the government was drugging Charles Manson, doing all these things. Like some random company pays Charles Manson to survey land, like out of he's not qualified at all to survey land in whatever Texas or Santa Cruz, wherever the hell he was out there. And his probation officer was like, I kept a watchful eye on him. How did you do that when you were a couple states away? It didn't make a lot of sense. Like a lot of things weren't adding up. But I think it gets to this point where it's like you start to realize, is someone meant like when you're in a room with someone, you can tell if there's like a mental bend to them where you're like, oh my God, this is like a psychopath. This is like a killer. I can't talk about this when you're stroking your arm like that on your cat. I know there's a cat there, but it doesn't look good when I'm looking through a Zoom call. Hang on a sec. Let me just get this out and you go back to petting your kitty.
No, let me do this then, Rob.
Thank you. Yeah,
Go
pray.
ahead, Rob. Continue.
But I think like people get stuff mixed up when it comes to intent and when it comes to like just someone saying something because they're trying to get a rise or they're trying to just get like we see it all the time on social media. There's people with blank accounts that don't make any sense where it's like an egg for a picture, but they're talking about like the government or they're trying to do something in a group where you know that person supports whatever you're going against on purpose because they like the arguments, they like the fighting, they like all this stuff, which makes it seem like there's a large percentage of people that just want to be assholes. It's like if that person was using their real name, their real thing, when people come on my show, a lot like there might be some comedic stuff when it comes to like the government and stuff, but when it comes to actual things, you can tell immediately when the conversation starts to get serious and it's not really like you're listening in your car, you're like, okay, it's not really joking anymore, they're being serious about this topic because they're both passionate and they both care about this type of thing. That's what you got to sense. It's like when someone cuts a fart in a room, the whole mood just changes. It goes, okay, well now there's something lingering in here and I can smell it. Doesn't smell good. Did you have beans last night? Like it starts to hit this new level where I think people have just lost the ability to get in touch with that. And I think there's also an issue with the fact that like you can't talk about certain things because it's like this is a hot topic. It's like the whole point is you should be able to express and talk more about it. So it's there should be no stigmatized topics in the world. In my opinion, you should try and get as much information, as much perspective as possible.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, when you talk about hot topics, I mean the you know what
Not
comes
the
into
clothing store.
well, no, but what comes into mind is things like, you know, like hot potato, all this stuff, like things you don't, you know, you can't hold on to. But a hot topic should be discussed. That's why it's a hot topic. It shouldn't be hot because it's infrared, or you can't, it's radiating and you can't touch it. That's not, I mean, topics. We need to talk about those things. We need to discuss. I mean, one of my favorite university professors was, and it's a trope. I mean, you hear it, a meme, like he would stand up in front of the room and he would say something like, um, nothing starts with an N and ends with a G. Discuss. And you would go, what? What did he just say? He go, or he would say, change my mind. Like I saw a post like that on something. It's the language nerds. I think the other day I posted, nothing starts with an N and ends with a G. Change my mind. Stuff like that, where you go, discuss. People don't discuss anymore. I mean, even though COVID and there's all these Zoom calls and stuff, it's, programs like this are fantastic. Like people talk, but they don't discuss. Does that make sense? Where they talk around issues. They don't pick sides anymore. Nobody picks a side anymore. Everybody wants to be down the
You
middle,
live.
and yeah.
Everybody
And
picks a side.
no, I mean, there's a lot of fence sitters. There's a lot of people going,
Well,
I can
there's
see
two,
both sides.
like I've said before, there's two types of people in the world. There's people that want to be left the fuck alone. There's people that won't leave them the fuck alone. There's just people that are so on, like there's no middle ground. That's the
Yeah.
thing, is like you would find that if with your differences, the whole point of having differences is to be able to talk about them, not punch somebody in the face, not do something insane like that. But that's what everybody resorts to, because I get it, because if you are in so much of belief and you care so much about something, but then I start to look at like, when do we like start like questioning, like maybe this person has like got the wrong perception of something, you know what I mean? It's like it's very very it's so questionable on everything, where it's just like the best thing we can do is to make sure we're not leaving a path of destruction for people that are following us. And then it gets down
Yeah,
this whole
yeah.
heated topic of like, I'm looking through the government CIA website at 1 o'clock in the morning. Dude, they had in 1958, they found in the Arctic, they went 20,000 or 10,000 something feet down, or no, just 20,000 feet down to try and
Yeah.
find a satellite that was a spy system from Russia. In 1958, they had and they showed a picture of like the satellite thing. Looks like something from UFO technology. Everything on the CIA website, like they released the UAP report, it's like 9 pages and it's just awful. But then you look at like all like the on the CIA website, it's CIA.gov, so you know it's real. It's not .org because they're not a nonprofit. But you hit it and you see like there's like unidentified flying objects articles, and then there's like a bunch of lists, and they don't name them. They just call like document 1.2266. So you don't know what you're clicking
Yeah.
into. You got to sit there. And I'm like, this is the best thing to do if you're a government and you have to release all the stuff that you don't want to release, but you have a Freedom of Information Act to be able to do so. So what you're going to do is you're not even going to name them. You're not going to title them to make them easier
You
for
just
someone
number
listening.
them. Yeah.
You put 1,000 up there that are all 1 page, 2 page, and then there's a good one in there where you're like, oh my God, this is like 60 something pages. And then you click on it and then you end up finding about a satellite or whatever, a spy system that was sent over here. There's things going back 50 years ago where they're like, China's building up an army to invade Taiwan is what we're predicting. So we need to keep a close eye on them. And I'm just looking at it like, God, why haven't they done it already? I'm just looking at it like they don't even recognize them as that's why I made a shirt for the Chinese people. I'm pro everybody. The CCP might
Yeah.
ban YouTube and Spotify, but I got a shirt for the people to wear.
Are they They want to ban Spotify now?
They already did that. They banned any like
Did they?
video or listening or streaming platform because of how everything in the past like year has been all about like the government issues there. And they're like, we don't want anybody knowing what's going on outside of this country. So we're going to keep you dim to our internet, and our internet's like on lock.
That's just weird. It's, but I suppose, when you think, because we've grown up in countries that are fairly, I want to say fairly free, because if I want to say we grew up with freedom, well, we actually, we had freedom of certain things, but other things we had no idea what was being actually kiboshed,
Well, the
but
safer thing to say is that our goalpost for freedom is a lot farther than most. I think everybody has a sense of freedom, but it's like,
yeah,
how free do they want you? It's like, how long am I going to get the 50-foot dog leash, or I'm going to get the 10-foot dog leash? That's kind of the
yeah.
point.
It reminds me of this. Nobody ever remembers it, and I wish I could find it. When I first came over here to the UK for a visit in 2002, they had this show on television that was like Big Brother. ish kind of thing. It was the Bachelor dating game. And what it was you were either a guy chained to a bunch of women, or you were a girl chained to a bunch of men, and you were linked together by these 6 to 8 foot long links of chain from your wrist. The bed that they used was this huge bed that like slept 15 people, really long, and so you had to kind of crawl into the middle. Although it was filmed at night, so they had an infrared camera. If you wanted to go to the bathroom, they had this, you could unclink yourself from the link, but you had to immediately connect yourself to the toilet chain, which brought you just far enough that would bring you to the toilet and come back. I remember watching 2 episodes of this thinking, this is the most bizarre thing I have ever seen in my entire life. And nobody remembers it really over here. It's sort of like when you mentioned something like, does anybody remember the banana splits? And you try and explain the cartoon or the Saturday morning thing, the banana splits, to people, and they go, I don't remember that. Were you on drugs? And I go, no, I wasn't on drugs. I'm gonna have to see if I can find this. But so that whole idea of like freedom and what it is, I mean, there's other countries out there that didn't have, their internet is strongly controlled, and their what they can actually watch and see is strongly controlled. And over here, we almost have too much freedom for that type of thing. Like when they talk about, I find it very difficult to get into conversations with people when they talk about freedom of speech versus harassment and online trolling. But
Fine line.
but when they talk about, they go, look, freedom of speech, and I go, you've just said that you were going to stalk this person, and you're going to stab their eyes out if you ever see them in public. That's not freedom of speech. That's
Power.
That's harassment. That's well, in a way, it's not even power, because you're sitting you're sitting in your little room, where whatever you're doing, that's fear, or there's cowardice, there's a lot of stuff there, you're lashing out. What is power, pardon me, is if you stood up in front of your camera and said it to someone else so everyone knows who you are. That's power, because you're owning your statement. If you're not owning your statement, that's not power, that's cowardice, you're hiding. But that's just my view of the whole thing. But so when you get into people are like, no, I need freedom of speech, I need to be able to say whatever I want. And I go, well, yeah, but then there's something called libel, and there's something called all this stuff that you can, like, if you harass somebody, or if you say something about someone that's not true, they can actually come back and say, guess what, Mr. Troll, I'm gonna take you to court. And you're like, oh shit.
Why did it become a Southern judge when you did that?
Because this is where it's all going to happen
now, Mr. Here lawyer.
This is it's all going to come down in the South. It's all going to be, it's the turnkey moment is going to be some little town just outside of, let's see, Athens, Georgia. That's right. I think, yeah. Just, where, because if, place anywhere that, you can get the B-52s and REM and all this can all come out of the same place. There's going to be some judge in there who's going to be like, all right, let's talk about freedom of speech.
Well, what's the worst you're gonna get in trouble? You're gonna get a bunch of people hating you, get your channel taken down or something like that. Like that's with all these YouTubers that are like a bunch of people going to their side, like bring them back. That one Mr. Beast guy, he was, or no, Dave Dorbick, whatever his name was. He was liable for I think one of his videos that he filmed was apparently a rape happened and he knew about it and he didn't say anything with one of the girls that was there. He just kind of filmed his video and did his thing. He had his channel taken down and then he comes back 6 months later and everybody's forgotten the whole take him down thing. They're all like, I'm so happy he's back. And it's there's a video of Bill Cosby coming out of jail, cops are walking around him and then everyone's like, Cosby. He goes, hey, that's what he says. There's no add-in. And I saw that and I was like, oh my God, what world are we living in?
Yeah. And it's all, see, this is, it's
one crazy how the people will kids nowadays are not going to know, who's Cosby? They go, is he an actor? He looked like he played in war movies. And they're like, Bill Cosby's not an actor. He did the most horrendous thing possible. And you get to see interviews where you can look it up on YouTube, It's like an insider with his wife, and his wife's like they're calmly like having questions, and at the ending he goes, "Can you this off the record?" And they're like, "Yeah, what's up?" And he goes, I want to get a tape of this before you release it, and I want to check over it, make sure that, you know." And they're like, What do you mean?" And you can see his wife like sitting there like, "What the fuck?" And he goes, "I just your integrity." He keeps saying integrity. And then like now I'm on social media and I see everybody putting up posts about Bill Cosby. The government put him in jail because he was saying things they didn't want. And I was like, what are you talking about, man? The government didn't
Yeah,
pay off all those people to be able to do, but I don't know.
yeah,
Maybe the page that I came across like almost a year ago that said Bill Cosby's innocent was right. I have no clue. Obviously, he's free,
yeah,
but he did find a workaround. He took it to civil court, which was you're not supposed to do.
yeah,
Someone was slipping on their job, and then everything kind of like, oh, well, you can't be tried again in actual court. You took them to civil court and you lost. So then everything kind of like went down this. But
yeah.
at least we have that one of the inmates threw a chicken patty at his face. So I mean, that
That's
was kind of fun.
that's the thing. I mean, I mean, here's I'm middle-aged white guy kind of thing, but you get into something that with the media where I call it OJ-itis in a way, where it's something has happened that somebody screwed up somewhere, they've overstepped, and as a result, um justice may not be done kind of thing because there's been a workaround. And that's a workaround is a great way to do it, but it's one of those things where it's yeah I'm the it's sad in a way. Like one of the things, like when I was talking about podcasts, like there's this one girl I watch because she's she's absolutely fascinating watching her play games kind of thing. She likes to play older games and things like that, and she swears like a trooper, and
Why is
she
that so
complete
enticing to watch someone play a game?
well, that's the thing. I mean, what it is there's just something about, if you don't, what I do is I usually have it in the background when I'm doing other things kind of thing. And it's I think what it is if you can find someone, for me anyway, if I find someone who's maybe playing something I would never play, or I don't have that system, or I don't do this anymore. Like what she does actually is she plays old Japanese games and she translates them into English, and then and there's some weird stuff. Like the Japanese had some really, really weird,
You
when
are
they got into things.
obsessed with that culture.
Well, not necessarily the culture. What it is it's more along the lines of I like a different perspective. I like a different point of view. Like they got issues. I mean, like, it's the same thing that with like it's extremely racist culture. And they're also very misogynistic, but that's changing. It's all changing. But when you grow up on an island with so many people, like you develop certain things like over here in the UK, they still had signs when I was looking to rent in like 2007. There were signs that you would come across on a building in the window that would say no Asians, no Irish people, right in the window. This is 2007. Now that's changed. It's
In
changing.
2007?
This is 2007. And
Oh
so
my
you'd walk along
God.
and you'd see that sign and you go, I don't think that's supposed to be here. So what you would do is you would mention it to like an authority figure, like the council. We would go, I was going to rent this place and there's this thing down there, and the council would say like, oh yeah, that's Mr. Jenkins. He puts up that sign every week. Every week we come in, we ask him to take it down, and we say we'll fine you, and he just puts the sign up, and you're like, okay, so he goes, it's not that big a deal. We just let him do his thing. And I go, well, yeah, actually, it is kind of a big deal. But if you allow that one person to do this, his little thing, and you kind of go, it's like that. There's that scene in Blazing Saddles where they say that, yeah, yeah, we'll take the black people, but we're not taking the Irish, and you kind of go, why is that such a big deal? But in the 70s, or even longer, there was, these huge um, controversies over that type of thing, over different types of where you came from. And these days, it's really strange. Like a lot of people, they're not actually even, everybody's an immigrant almost, in a way, the way things are going. We have to trace back quite far to get, I came from somewhere else kind of thing. And um, yeah, we've danced over lots of top, but this girl, this podcast, she did one of her shows was, I'm going to go over my DMs kind of thing, and just talk about them. because I like to talk about my, the people who are watching me kind of thing.
Yeah.
And she gets like, 1,000, 2,000 people, streaming with her, like, in the comments. And it's sad that people need moderators to go through your stuff while you're streaming, because there's going to be people who are typing in hate while you're going. And so
Or
you need
typing
to,
in their porn link or whatever the hell it
yeah,
is that
yeah.
says,
And
I
so,
just disable comments. What's the
yeah,
issue?
exactly. So but what she does is, so she, like, if she's doing like a live stream, like the people who Twitch, that's insane, the people who do that. There are people who, who put themselves in front of all these cameras, where, so she's going, yeah, I had this live stream, I've got moderators and stuff, but she's going, I'm going to go through my DMs. And she goes, yeah, and she's reading, she's going, you guys are awesome. I mean, this is great. I mean, this is the first time in a while where I haven't seen a "you should go kill yourself" comment, or "I'm fat." There's no fat comments today. And
I
I'm looking
haven't
at this
heard those
going,
in a long time.
well, but I'm looking at this going, that's a good thing. Like, what? That's,
The content creating culture has completely changed, Casper. We could talk about, like, with voice acting, for instance, like
yeah,
the one guy who did Simpsons Apu. Like, that didn't, none of that, like, race, none of that stuff mattered.
yeah,
When, if you really think of the concept, like, people call Quentin Tarantino racist, but somehow he gets away with a lot of it. It's like, I wouldn't call it racist. I call it a person that's bringing their artistic creation to something.
yeah,
I don't like when you're creating something, at least if you're not like a horrible human being. I don't like when I do podcast episodes, I don't go, okay, I need to make sure I have this type of ethnicity on or this type of, it
yeah.
doesn't make sense. I'm not thinking to
No,
that level. I'm
the
thinking of
the
the
whole the
topic.
yeah, and the whole point of something like The Symptoms, like where you had like Harry Shearer and all these, absolutely fantastic voice actors. The whole point was they can be different characters, and that's what made it funny, and that's what made it entertaining, where you have one guy doing 28 voices on the show or something. That's fantastic.
It's
They're
Bill Burr's joke. He talked about that. They were mad that the guy who played, what is that movie with The Rock? It's where he's like going on skyscrapers, Andreas or something like that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, yeah.
They're mad that I guess he had like a arm that was missing. He was supposed to have like a prosthetic arm, and they're mad that they didn't get a prosthetic person to play that, like a actual person who was missing the arm to be more accurate, but instead they got The Rock. He's like, does that mean in horror movies, like when the dude's paralyzed, we have to get a person that's paralyzed to play it? Like, it doesn't make sense. Like when you're doing the whole point, it's voice acting. You're
Well,
trying to hit the other pitches. If you get someone
this
that is doing that, isn't that just talking? I don't get it.
Yeah, it's like when you get into, you make a good comment, even though I'm very much an advocate for bringing in people with, I don't want to say disabilities, they're differently abled people. Where it's like someone in a wheelchair or someone with Down syndrome or somebody like that. If you can, blind person, deaf person, if you're going to, particularly with blind and deaf, I think that's something you could bring in where you can do that. But where this is, the whole thing is, you're pretending. That's what acting is.
Mm.
I mean, this people who get into like the Meisner method and the real stuff, I don't want to offend a lot of people. Like, I know they're like, yeah, what's wrong with that? But I mean, the whole method acting thing is, you're pretending. This is play, and it's going to be over when you're done. Like, so
that's pretending. This is real right here.
yeah,
What we're doing right now.
of course, this, and hopefully it's real. Hopefully we're not, pulling the, so if you're going to hire somebody who's in a wheelchair, there was a show over here called, what the heck was it? I'm getting old. I'm gonna have to think. It was a show about coroners here in the UK, and it was one of these really unrealistic shows, because the coroners were actually doing the police officers' work half the time. When the coroner goes out, is actually hunting the clues and trying to find out how this person was killed and stuff. That's actually not their job. That's but they had hired this one woman who, she had a type of disease. I don't know what it was, but she was fantastic on the show. And a lot of people, when she appeared on the show, said, "Oh, that token disabled person, let's bring him in." But she brought an element to the show that was really good, because they never talked about her condition or anything like that, because that wasn't important. She was good at her job, and so she just added an element to the show of, there are people who can do things the same. Now, when you're doing movies and things like that, exactly. If somebody's paralyzed, it's tough to hire a paralyzed person because
I look
when
at
the
that as
scene is
making fun of the person. It's like for the cancer patient, like the posters in the hospitals, it would be
yeah,
fucked up if they got an actual cancer person to be like, donate $1, save my, like that's messed up. So they get an actor to play the cancer kids or something. It's even worse if you get an actual kid with cancer that, hey, put on a brave face real quick. I need to make a fucking poster so we can get some money to donate and hopefully get you your treatment. That's messed up. Isn't that the same thing as getting like, I get it. Look, I think if you're fit for the role, you're fit for the role. If you're good, as a creator, you're looking for the person that best fits whatever your idea you're trying to put out. No matter their race, no matter whatever, if they play the part, they play the part, they get the part. That's the whole thing.
they that's a good shout. I mean, that's the whole thing. I mean, there was a play called Miss Saigon that came out which is set, I think, during the Korean. So I don't want to get there is a the lead actor is Chinese, and he was not on Broadway and in the West End. He was not played by a Chinese actor. He was played by someone else who was in makeup, kind of thing. And it reminds me of, and I'm going to have to send you the link if I can find it. There was a show over here called The Avengers with
Robert Downey Jr.
No, Patrick. Is it Patrick Sneed and Emma
Watson?
I wanted to, no, Diana Rigg, and Patrick Sneed, I think his name was. I'll have to see. I'm losing my brain here because I've filled up with so many things. But this was a show like in the late 50s, early 60s, when you know having, just when they had fight scenes and women acting. And so it's being filmed here in the UK. So you can understand that it's a TV show filmed in the UK. So the bad guys in this particular episode were all Chinese. And what they did was they had white actors with pieces of tape over their eyes, and you could see the
Jesus
tape.
Christ.
And you could see the tape that was makeup in. And then Diana Rigg, who was so hot back then, she wore this like plastic jumpsuit thing, and so Diana Rigg gets into a fight with one of her guards, who's this Chinese man. And so the moment the fight starts,
allegedly.
no, the moment the fight starts, all of a sudden Diana Rigg shoulders have gotten much wider, and there's this really bad wig, and it's a guy in a plastic jumpsuit with a wig on fighting this supposed Chinese man with tape on his eyes. And I'm watching this going, oh my God, how did they not see that there was so, like, why couldn't they get a girl to do the fight? Why did they have to get a guy dressed up? And Diana Rigg was hot, so they got this sort of kind of overweightish stunt guy to step in to do this fight scene. And it's one of the funniest things I ever saw, because the change. So they just show her from the back kind of thing all the time. So it's this big wig, and all of a sudden she's lost all her curves. So she's like straight. She's got a gut.
Well, do you see the other perspective in that though? Imagine if she was like, we need you to do the stunt. And she was like, no, go get a stunt double to do it. And it's like, well, we don't have a female stunt double to do that. I don't care. I'm not going to do that. That's a dangerous thing. Johnny Knoxville,
Exactly.
a lot of his stunts are himself, but also at the same time, he had a stunt double. Like I think his movie Point Break or Point Shoot, whatever, the one where he's building like a water park or something like that with a bunch of kids. He did a lot of his own stunts. It's actually where a lot of his injuries, like worst ones, had occurred, even when besides the fact of where he fought Butterbean.
This is the thing. I mean, what you do with something like this, though, is you look at it and you go, okay, like the whole point of the Avengers is there's a fight scene every episode. There's a fight scene between the
it's called the Avengers. It's not called the Pacifists.
Yeah. So because there's a fight scene, you'd think they'd have a stunt double. No, that's the thing. This is back during a time when women they weren't allowed to do, like, you didn't have female stunt doubles. They just didn't really exist. And it wasn't until there was a push for that to get more realism and all the things like that. So you get into actors like, say, Jackie Chan. He did all his own stunts. He's broken more bones in his body than Evel Knievel.
I'm glad you brought this up because I actually watched a documentary on him.
Yeah.
So they asked, like, they were interviewing him. They were like, so why'd you stop like making movies? Like, you were really big in Rush Hour. You were really big in like a bunch of movies. And he goes, because they weren't letting me go farther than the stereotypical Asian role, which is just being this guy who can barely speak English. And this is from his perspective. He goes, it's just, I stopped doing it. So I went to Hong Kong, started making films back down there. And hearing him say that, it's like you start to look at his acting career. Nobody ever thought to put him in like a serious movie. He was in The Foreigner, which was pretty good, but
Yeah.
it's still kind of the same specific type casting role of like a foreign person in another land, and it's like seen as different. And he goes, I'm a good actor. I'm not going to do a film if they're not going to give me something that I feel is like credible to do. Like Nick Cage in Willy's Wonderland. I fucking love Willy's Wonderland. I've seen it 1,000 times, but everyone hates that freaking movie because they're like, it's a terrible movie. Look, he doesn't say a damn word in the whole entire movie because they know that budget's going to go way up if he speaks a word, but it's still good. It's Nick Cage, but a lot of Nick Cage's roles are the same shit. Someone stole his wife, someone stole his daughter, someone stole his pig is a new one that's coming out. And I'm like, look, man, if that's what he wants to play, good. But he's not. I mean, he's obviously a national treasure actor. Like, no pun intended, he did do National Treasure. So he has the
Yeah.
capability of expanding out there, but everyone sees him in this role. And that's what happens. Why does every villain have to be like a super big buff tatted guy or be a
Did you
Asian person?
did you ever see the movie he was in where he thinks he's a vampire?
He thinks he's a vampire or he is a vampire.
I have to find this movie. I watched this movie with my sister and I was like, holy crap. Like, if you want to see Nick Cage tour de force, oh my God. He goes to a like a goth nightclub and he meets this woman who convinces him that she's a vampire and she bites him. Uh whether it's on the neck or something, and so he thinks that he's going to turn into a vampire. So he the entire movie is now him. And this is where I guess you make a good point. You go, did he really turn into a vampire? Because it's like it's so over the top. And so this he ends up, biting a guy in the neck and tearing his throat out, but he doesn't have the sharp teeth, and he goes out and buys some plastic teeth because he goes, my teeth aren't working, they're not coming in yet. But he flips his sofa over and he's sleeping underneath his sofa because he doesn't have a coffin. And oh man, this movie is like, they just let him go. They just said, go ahead. There isn't really a script. Just, you think you're a vampire, go. What would happen? What would change in your life? They go, this is your character, this is you, this is your life, and now you think you're a vampire.
Sounds like a
And
great fucking movie.
and he's like, no, wait a second, am I a vampire? And they're like, we don't know. You think you are. What do you think? And so they just let him go. And it's a very difficult movie to watch because it's basically it's really a journey into a person's madness in a way. Is he a vampire? No idea. But what it's doing to him mentally is like just nuts. I'll see if I can I'll find a link and I'll send it to you. But it's all down to, I mean, here we are, we're down to like things where, I mean, he gets made fun of all the time. There's all with the entertainment industry these days where they're saying that, I mean, I think we talked about it before, where they were going to try and ban chefs from making foreign food unless they were that ethnicity. Like, you shouldn't be able to make Chinese food unless you're Chinese. And some people had posted that, they went that far to say that, and they go, what are you, ridiculous? Like, Chinese food is a type of food, but I don't need to be Chinese to make it. And they're like, well, no, then you're not making Chinese food, you're making Chinese style food. And
I've
you're like,
talked to
oh
plenty of
my.
people that study food history, and they talk about like how it's seen as like kind of, you shouldn't have the right to make something that's not of your culture. I'm like, but isn't the whole point of food supposed to be shared? Like, when we look at like the grand aspect, if we think of like maybe if you want to take it to religion, which I've been getting heavily obsessed with religion, not that I'm turning religious, it's more on the aspect I like how it's been like a huge influence, and then that now there's like everyone's like, what the hell do we do? And it's like, well, religion is at its all point low. So maybe that was a structure that was keeping everybody a little bit sane. You know, when you woke up in the morning thinking that a being was watching after you or a guardian angel, made your day a little bit better. But now everyone's like, nobody's
Well,
watching over me. Nobody cares about me. I want to
the,
die. It's like, oh my God.
the strange thing about, I believe, if you want to like look at history, I mean, the strongest cultures in the world were all matriarchies. And then if you want to destroy a civilization, introduce religion and education. uh, it's always religion first, and then when education appears, people learn how they've been screwed over. So then it all, you know, when you as soon as you introduce education into a society, and then things begin to entropy in a way, because it's sort of like when people learn, they stop learning. Like they hit a certain level where they go, I've been getting crapped on, you know, I've been getting shit on, and then they stop learning. They stop learning why, or how do we fix this. So what they do is everyone rushes out of the schools to go beat up on the churches, and nobody's learning anymore. And that's kind of where we're at right now. People have sort of run outside, and they're running around going with sticks and what, how did Spock put it, with stone knives and bear skins, is when he was talking about, you know, there's an episode where he talked, but it's all down to like people are not stopping and going, wait a second, why are we doing this? Like what, you know, and you know, why did, you know, there's certain there, you know, there's a reason why, you know, uh things were redacted and this and that, and at the time when people were trying to hide some from us, and very much so, like you're talking about, you found the CIA thing, and it's opening up a world for you. But at the same time, like, because it's happened 50 years ago, you're reading this going, that's really cool. But at the same time, inside, are you going, um I have all this new information, it's going to change everything, because it's already happened already. So what is changing? Like, is your perspective changing? Are you going, wow, they did all this stuff, does that mean that they're actually they're hiding stuff now? Yeah, they're hiding stuff now.
I just think
Governments
it's cool as shit. I like just like it how so many
exactly.
people like if you literally told me right now, like if you gave me the weirdest like idea or the craziest horrendous thing you could possibly think of, I bet I could Google it and it would be a government project. Like that's the
or
crazy thing.
or a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie.
Probably. And that's what I think is like interesting for a lot of people that
Time Cop.
well, a lot of people don't sit there and they go like, that sounds crazy. That sounds insane. I'm like, but would you put it against someone that's trying to find out information? I mean, the only issue with religion and science in a way, in my eyes, is that religion gives a blanket statement for finding an answer. And the answer is God, or the answer is that's what they intended. That's the religious way.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
with science, it's like, but how do you explain this? How do you, it's questioning, 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 questioning. I think life is full of questions. I don't think there is an answer to anything. And I think that's kind of the importance of this whole like
Yeah.
tandem or this line. I think every science education, they go hand in hand. But
Oh, very much so, yeah.
well, I meant not science, religion and education go hand in hand. But I think
Well,
the
even
aspect that they come at Casper, I let you talk and I'm letting you rant, but you gotta let me get a little bit out.
okay, go ahead.
Just nod your head. You don't have to say yes. It's gonna make it an editing nightmare. I'm kidding. But seriously, no, I think there's an aspect of like there's another goal we should be striving to, another thing that we should be reaching for. And I just want people to understand that we can't have so much reliant into one thing, because the only thing you should really have reliance in is yourself, because you're going to be the only person that gets you out of bed in the morning, the only person that makes you move, makes your legs move, makes everything function. You know, there's a lot of stuff where I think everything comes down to a leash of control, and people want to try and extend it out. They want to ask for favors. They want to get ahead by getting some attention from something. I'm like, it's going to work out or it's not. I don't have the prediction in your life to be able to tell you if it is, but maybe you hit that one ride that brings you all the way to the top, or maybe you have this one downfall. I have no clue. But the best thing that you can do is try your hardest to feel like in the place that you are right now, that you're doing your best to move forward rather than staying in the past.
I totally agree. I think a lot of people, me in particular, I was really, in fact, it was, you know, part of my heart attack with that smartened me up was I was really stuck in the past. There were things that I remember saying to my ex-wife, for example, I would go, yeah, there's these things. And she would go, why is that important to you? That's so in the past. Like, and for me, it was important. Like the past was important. And yes, you learn from your mistakes and all that, but I was living in the past. Like a lot of my reasons for doing stuff were because, well, this is why I've always done it this way, or
Why
this,
are you still
or this
listening to your ex-wife?
Yeah. Why? Well,
Yeah.
we're still friends, kind of thing. But but even then,
She doesn't have any control over you, man.
well, this is the funny thing. I mean, when I got my tattoo, um, she's the only person who didn't like it, and she called me up on Saturday night to say, "Please tell me that piece of garbage on your arm is a fake. It's a fake photo." And I went, "Why?" And I went, "You know what? I actually don't want to talk about this right now." So I hung up.
I would have been
So
like, who the fuck are you?
so no, so she sent me a WhatsApp message the next day saying, uh, you do see where I'm coming from, right? And her whole point was, I didn't tell her first that I was getting one. And I kind of thought, we haven't been married for 4 years. I mean, why do I have to tell you anything? That's the whole. But so there's this element of, I think people like to, in general, we like to think we have an element of control. And one of the things I have learned so much is we cannot control other people. You can't, like, the more you try to control someone else, the unhappier you're going to be, because you have no idea what's going on in their head. And it comes back to what we were talking about earlier with
Manson.
well, yes, exactly. Well, when you
MK
have,
Ultra.
yeah, when you have, there's all these people, like there's unique individuals out there that, when you look at one of the once I was cast as a serial killer on a show called John Doe.
Hang on.
This is
That's this is
okay.
a weird panty dropper. Hang on a second. What do you
This
mean?
no, this is, so I was cast as a serial killer,
Okay.
and on the show,
Because they could
I
sense
show up
that
at,
it was there.
well,
inside
there's a couple of things that happened right away, which was really, I found very, very funny. In Vancouver at the time, when you were an actor, you were something called a day player, which meant that you would go on set, say a couple lines, and then you were done for the show, because there were so many shows that were done, and that's what you did. You went from show to show to show, and you did your stuff. And when you think about it from writing perspective, the show is about the main characters. If you can get on the show and get more than "This way, Agent Scully," that's awesome. You're probably a main, a guest star. So what ended up happening in Vancouver was the TV shows would bring all their own people. And so I get cast as, I'm living in Vancouver, I get cast as a serial killer. The first thing that happens is I do the scene for the casting director, and the casting director goes, "Kasper, that was awesome. But it's kind of like being mutilated by a teddy bear." and I said, I get it, because I was a bit heavier than and stuff. And she goes, "You don't really come across as a serial killer." And that was the whole point. The moment they sent my audition to the people who were doing the show, they immediately contacted her back and said, "That's our guy." And she went, "Why? You haven't even watched the thing?" And he went, "Because he doesn't look like a serial killer." That's the whole point. Every single person who's been a serial killer, the big ones. I mean, there's like Son of Sam. When you see him, you kind of go, "Oh, he's kind of creepy." But Ted Bundy did not look creepy. Like, he looked really
Explain
put together. He was, well, see, Leatherface wasn't a serial killer. He was just he was someone with anger issues, and who's somebody who liked to play with chainsaws. So, but serial killer, I don't know. I don't know. And
If I was going to put
but
you
you
in
get
a
into,
T from what I know you as, I wouldn't strike
yeah,
you. Don't strike me as a bad person. You strike me as a very good, nice, calm, like very open and compassionate person.
yeah.
But I can sense you got a lot of anger inside of you that's just waiting
Which,
to come out.
well, which is why, as an actor, playing, you talk to any actor and they will say playing the villain is always the funnest part, because you get to channel stuff that you normally wouldn't do. But so being a serial killer on this show, that's when we're talking about perspectives, there's unique, like, people would look at me and go, "Well, he doesn't look like a serial killer," and they go, "Yeah, they never do." That's what you hear. I was talking to the neighbors, "He was such a nice boy, I didn't think he'd be a serial," he didn't. They're never, you never talk to the neighbors, and the neighbors went, "Yeah, I always thought there was something creepy about him. I just knew he was going to go out and start stabbing people." You're like, well, no, that just doesn't, how it's not how it works. So I show up on set, and the first thing that happened was I meet this girl who I just worked with last week on another show. And she looks at me and she goes, "Okay, Mr. Michaels, I'm going to take," and I go, "Clara, it's me, Kasper." And she goes, what are you doing here?" And I go, what do you mean?" I go, I'm your guest star." She goes, "I didn't know you were from this America. Like, where do you live, LA?" And I go, "No, I live just down the street." And she goes, "But they only cast Americans as guest stars." And I went, "Okay, this is really weird." And so, and people started treating me differently. And then the other thing that happens is you have people coming up to going, "Okay, are we allowed to talk to you?" And I said, What do you mean? They said, well, the last time we did one of these and we had a serial killer, he decided to be in character all the time. When he was at lunch, when he was in this, when he was walking around, you didn't talk to him. And it kind of made, and I go, you know what? I can turn it off when I'm not working. In fact, there is a scene on the show I remember in particular where I come up and I sneak up behind this police officer and I cut his throat. I cut his throat. And then I kind of do this really, odd face and so I run. So I do this thing. I sneak up on the police officer. I cut his throat and I kind of jump back and the director goes, and cut. And I kind of stand up and go, woohoo! That was a lot of fun, wasn't it? And everybody's like, and they're laughing because they're like, because it was just so much fun to play this character. And again, it comes back to, I mean, okay, here's a serial killer. Do we start hiring serial killers to play serial killers because we're going to offend someone who's, it's like, you're not a serial killer. You're just pretending to
That'd
be
be
a
a
serial
good
killer.
plot to a movie if you hired a serial killer to play a serial
Well,
killer, but you knew the guy was a serial killer, but he got off in court and you needed to find evidence. So you would cast him in a role to be a serial killer, see how he would do it, and see if it matched up to the actual
and
scene.
yeah, and I suppose, yeah, it could be a thing, but at the same time, that was the thing. At the same time, that'd be a really creepy set because it's specifically if people started dying on the set, kind of thing, because everyone would turn and he'd go, "Hey, it's not me. I did. It's not. I didn't do it." But it could be. You never know. And that's
You would
so. And
find
this
the
is all
hidden
back.
serial killer.
Yeah. What type of show would that be? You know what? We are so close to the Roman gladiatorial games, bread and circuses type thing, with shows like Big Brother, or even, when you get into the Ultimate Fighter series, the UFCs and the MMAs, and where we're getting close, where there's a bit there's violence, but we're one step away from somebody handing someone a crowbar and saying, okay, you two guys are going to go at each other with crowbars, but not the pointy end. Just try and bludgeon. Because the pointy end, the fight will be over too quick. So just and you're like, really? It's like, yeah, crowbars, go ahead and go. And you're like, wow. And you wonder when that's going to happen. Like, will they do it with like criminals? Will this be part of it? Because we're close to that thing, but we're also at that sort of, let's not offend anybody, because let's not offend the criminals. Let's not do this. Are we allowed to call them criminals? Are they, it's just really,
What criminal is taking offense to being called a criminal?
people who think they're innocent.
That's true.
They're
And
like,
maybe
I
call
didn't do
them
it.
middle roaders.
So if somebody, because if someone's in jail, for example, here we are, or someone's in prison, does not make them a criminal. They could be there for many reasons. Or maybe they did it.
Well, that's like when people say like they're in jail for pot. It's like, that's not even a crime. It's like, well, it's technically still a crime, but it's becoming legal. If you did it when it's illegal, doesn't make it right if it ends up becoming legal. Like they had a big thing with the Olympics. Somebody asked me a serious question. What do you think about the person that smoked pot because they were in the Olympics? And do you think that they shouldn't have been able to play? I was like, 100%. They go, what? It's pot though. And I'm like, I don't give a fuck if you're taking Tylenol. I don't care. I don't want you taking anything. If it's a natural competition between natural athletes, I don't want you taking a damn thing. Advil, Tylenol, whatever. But then someone brought up a point, which I ended up finding out later. Her mother had died apparently 2 weeks before she smoked. So now knowing that, I understand, but still someone should have been like, hey, you got to have some common sense when it comes to, this is going to get tested for.
This is where we're at, like where you make a very valid point where you say it's becoming legal. And so if we as a culture decide to do something that we know is illegal just because we think it shouldn't be, and you get caught and punished, well, you can advocate, for it, but still you did bad, you kind of thing. So here's someone who's in this professional sport, you're exactly right, where it's going to get monitored. It's very strict these days, particularly the drug testing that they do is, what's going to happen. So she's been in extenuating circumstances. They're sad, they're understandable, but because she's a professional athlete, she really needed somebody there to. It's the that's a Britney Spears thing where
Well, it's
you're
if I
not.
told you
where
right now that you have a special movie role that's going to take 8 hours tomorrow, and then you're like in your head, like, should I take all these laxatives to try and lose weight before my role, even though there's a possibility it might not work tomorrow? That's kind of the
Yeah,
thing. It's like you gotta kind of
yeah,
weigh your options here. But hey, I mean, she was like, okay, I understand, and back down from it. So I mean, it's not really a big of an issue. My
yeah,
issue is
and
here is that we have a person that has been whatever they want to say, allegedly. People can get pissed off about that all they want, but a bunch of accounts of people coming out saying that this person had slipped something into their drink, and then we can't bring them to court because it's double jeopardy because he took it to civil court in the first place. That's an issue we need to fix. A real crime, a real heinous, horrible fucking act that is somehow good to go because you can't try them again for the same shit. And I'm like, that's a little bit of bullshit right there.
yeah. The whole double indemnity thing is you kind of. Do you remember the movie Double Indemnity with Tommy Lee Jones and Ashley
Nope.
Judd and oh yeah, see, it was, I think it was out before you were born.
I'm not even gonna act like I had somebody reach out, go, I'd love to come on to the show. And I was like, we kind of already talked about that one thing. I'm on a new thing. And he's like, I could talk about before the era of the cell phone. And I'm like, anybody before 2000 can talk about the era before the fucking cell phone. That's not interesting.
I see, because I remember when the best accessory for your cell phone was a new shoulder strap.
A shoulder strap.
You take that to the bank. That was back in the day where it was like, hello.
It's like when people
They
buy
had
holsters for their hot sauce. I'm like, do you
I
really
was
carry that much hot sauce?
exactly. I was so upset the other day. I saw this TikTok post and TikTok, but it was a guy. He goes, look at this. What has happened to our culture? So he says, okay, I'm going to pretend I'm using the phone, and he goes like this. He goes, I'm hanging up the phone. Then he goes to his wife. He goes, hey. She goes, what? He goes, pretend you're on the phone. She goes like this. Yeah. She goes, okay, now hang up. Okay, good, excellent. He goes to his son, who's like 6, and goes, hey. He goes, yeah. Pretend you're on the phone. The guy goes like this. He goes, okay, now hang up. Excellent. Goes to his daughter, who's like 4. Hey, pretend you're on the phone. Hang up. So we don't do this anymore because nobody knows what an actual Creole phone is. So like when you
Well,
on
I'm gonna have
movies,
to
if
edit
somebody's
that
pretend,
out because that's a race thing right there. You can't do that.
what's a race thing?
The phone symbol.
This?
Yep. Don't do it again.
No.
What are you
It's
doing?
well, because I have no idea what it is.
You can't
So
do that
if I mean,
anymore.
oh wow, I see. I had no idea.
So that's an AAP I hate thing that you just did.
See, but because it used to be a surfer thing, it used to
Well,
be a good
okay
thing.
used
Now
to
it's
be the okay symbol, but now it's white supremacy, so you can't do that either.
wow. Yeah, okay. You could. So let's see
See,
if I
I
can.
was joking about the phone thing, but in 5 years, actually, that could be an actual thing. That's what I'm saying. Is like, when do you start to realize that someone's just saying something, trying to explain about how it's been used before? And then I guess you could bring it the other way too. It's like, that's how racism is, like accidental racism. I'm like, man, I don't know what that. This is why I'm worried about shit that happens in the past, because I can focus on stuff that happened in the past. Like my thoughts, for instance, the Manson thing. They did okay. So Operation Midnight Climax is a real thing you can look up. It's a real government program where
Yeah,
they would literally drug Johns and they would just make them like there was a story about a guy who was in the Air Force, and there was a psychiatrist that was known to drug the people there. And the only reason they didn't be able to incriminate them is because the guy only knew the doctor's last names. He never knew their first names. So when they would look on the branch, there was a bunch of people with that last name. So he was like, which one is it? And the dude could not recognize a face. So these people ended up
yeah,
eventually just getting off on it. So he remembers waking up covered in blood. Cops had found him. And I guess apparently that night, a family with a little girl had went to this park at night, and it was like a dry heat or something like that. They wanted to get out and get some air. It was like really late at night. I mean, that happens. People go into parks really late at night,
yeah,
either
yeah,
to do
yeah, yeah.
drugs or to fucking just ride a swing at 1 o'clock in the morning. It's fucking freeing. And this little girl had run off, and the parents were kind of like not really, they weren't really sober, they were intoxicated, so they ended up like talking and then wondering where their daughter was like an hour later. And they had found the Air Force guy who never had a criminal past, was actually getting treated by a psychiatrist in the Air Force base for, I think it's Latchin, I think is the name of the
Yeah, yeah.
Air Force base. And he had been known to have migraines so much that he would stick his head in tubs of ice. So he went there to go get that treated. They gave him a drug. Woke up, cops found him in the bushes with scratches all over him and blood all over him, and he had murdered the little girl. And he doesn't remember a fucking thing because the drug that they gave him was a type of LSD, and it's a form of it that they were giving to Charles Manson to do his acts. Because every time he'd get arrested, they'd release him like not even a couple hours later. And they're like, how is he, if he's on probation, how is he able to travel halfway across the country? And how are you still keeping an eye on him? And why are they paying him to survey land? That's not in his job description. He doesn't have any information on that. You start to see the sketchy start type of stuff that start to lead up to it.
Yeah, you mentioned that. Yeah.
It's what I'm saying. It's like there are so many accounts of Operation Midnight Climax that ends up getting into like the MK Ultra, the mind control experiments and stuff. And people say this isn't real stuff. And I'm like, it's real documented proof in the CIA articles because it happened like in the 70s. It happened so long ago, but people don't want to believe it because they don't think anybody could be so horrible to do so. But it's all about information. Information is something where it's like you don't care about who's at fault. If you're going to test animals, you're going to test people. You don't care. You don't have that sense because you want to know what, oh, this is going to lead to this. Oh, this is going to be a good weapon. The guy who invented what are those that horrible like toxic gas that makes people choke to death, vomit, and like die from like asphyxiation. It was used in the military against the Nazis.
What's
it,
not mustard? It's not mustard
it's
gas.
a
You're thinking
form
of
of like mustard
yeah,
gas, but the
yeah.
guy who invented it saw what happened with what was going on, and he ended up killing himself. Like the dude saw what it was being used for. He didn't intend it to be used for that. He intended it to be able to like knock people out or something like that, but it ended up going a horrible way and they took it the wrong direction and used it. And he
Oh
saw
man.
mass genocide at the thing that he created and he killed himself. Like that's like you start to look at like it might not be intended to go a certain way, but then it ends up going that way because people want to see how far they can push the boundary. Like, oh, he laughed so hard, he spit milk all over himself. How long until he pisses himself from laughing so hard? That's the whole thing. It's like people see it
Yeah.
and they don't see what the outcome of a lot of this stuff is. And that's how we get into the situations and predicaments we're in. And I find it fucking fascinating. It's why I don't try and examine anything that happens now because it's just going to piss me off because I can't do anything about it. That's my main thing. If I hate not being in control, like when when you have an older sibling that holds your arms and legs down and you can't move and you feel powerless like a child. I hate that. So I focus on things in the past, things that have already happened that I have no recourse or anything to be able to go into. And I just look at it and examine it and be like, okay, well, that's probably what's still happening today. It just takes another form.
No, I hear you there. I mean, the Oppenheimer when he did his whole thing with the
Atomic
the
bomb.
atom bomb, he wasn't his what did he say? I become death, destroyer of worlds. Like
Yeah.
he wasn't a happy camper when he saw the bomb go off. It he was sad.
You want your name to be
That's
attached to like a Toys R Us or something good or Chucky fucking Cheese, not attached to a nuclear bomb that's going to kill millions. And if you
and
see
so
how they tested these bombs, there's a documentary, a bunch of like sailors. One of them actually they got a witness, like one that who was actually there, talk about it like 50 years later. He's an older man. And he talks about when he was in his 20s being on this Navy ship, and all they said was, everybody do not stare right into the blast, tuck your head, like get in like the fetal position, like your head into your knees and hold. And they just talked about how they would like some of them, like they told you close your eyes. The explosion would go off. They launched like an atom bomb near this ship to see what would happen with
yeah,
these people if they would survive without letting them know this was going to happen. Just an explosion that was going to go off. And they all kept their eyes closed. And they said it was like X-ray. They could see through their eyelids, they could see everything, their hands, everything just got super bright. And then they talked about like how many people got sick after that. I mean, Operation Sea Spray was in San Francisco. They sprayed a bunch of chemicals in the air, talking about it was for weather. And then a bunch of people went to the hospital sick, but they never chalked it up. Like one person died of a heart attack or died of cardiac arrest or something. And they were like, well, it's not linked to this. He had no medical conditions. I'm like, okay. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and argue with this whole concept of this thing. Is it possible that it could be? Sure. But there's a lot of things that could possibly have led up to that. But you start to look at like, are they really above when people say they're spraying crops or they're spraying stuff with a type of chemical? That's why you see the airstreams. I don't know
yeah,
because it's happened in the past. How do you know what's in the future? You're not giving room for us to trust you when you've broken the trust already.
Yeah, I mean, I think back of when I was a kid, when they used to spray for mosquitoes. And we imagine, like, 20 or 30 children riding behind this pickup truck that's dragging this spewer, is the only way to, which was spraying DDT all over the town, kind of thing. So in big, huge, and we just thought, as children, we just thought it was really cool in the summer to ride behind this vehicle in this fog, in this cloud. Isn't this cool? Isn't this cool? So we're sucking, DDT into our lungs, like, straight up. And of course, there's nothing wrong with me, everything's good, but it's one of those things where you go, was it bad? Maybe. I don't know what happened, just I do, there's no one, did it affect any of us? I can't remember. It's one of those things where you go, did it make certain things happen, or did we do, did certain things, oh
Well,
wow.
these case studies and all these stuff that like people do these experiments, I find it so fascinating. I don't know if you heard my episode where I talked about I created my own little social experiment to see how far I could go with like people that I cared about. Like see, like it was to
Oh
test
no.
like how strong you would stand in your convictions in a way. I haven't talked about it in a while, but it was like maybe like 20, 30 episodes back. I was talking to Kelly about it. I was like, yeah, I did this social experiment where there was one of five possible outcomes a person would give you. One, when you're having a conversation, I would pick a topic that you would hate to talk about, that you knew that it was going to be like something that you stand strongly in and you wouldn't want to talk about it, and see if the conversation would expand based on your relationship with this person. Now, without knowing me, would it end right there? A lot of people would shut down the conversation or just choose to leave it alone, not or just not even like message back, just go ghosting for like a day or so and maybe reach out a little bit later. And I would still bring up the same topic. Now, I tried this on a couple of friends. It came down to shutting down the conversation, um, and trying to find something that's a weakness to that person and attack them for that. Um, Nobody really explained like, hey, this bothers me. Nobody said that. They just choose to cut off the relationship.
Wow.
So I tested
Wow.
this experiment with like 15 people, and it was
Yeah.
all like cutting off the relationship or all like going to attacking that person rather than just explaining, hey, this is how I feel. I don't really like talking about this type of thing. So like my one buddy, he he Father's Day was a big day for him. He's a dad of like a couple of kids. So I was like, well, it's just another day for some people. And he was like, dude, what do you mean? Like it's Father's Day. Why do you always just message me to argue with me? And I'm like, I'm not. And he goes, you're so exhausting. And I was like, I know I am. And it was kind
I
of the
think
point of it, was to show that like you're willing to attack someone or you're willing to cut off the relationship instead of talking it out. There's not a lot of conversations like I've been talking about. And that was my little social experiment that kind of bunked. But one that I found is super interesting, and that one's called Robbie's Rhetoric. So I'm not a scientist, but I've had some scientists say that's a good experiment. I was like, I know. But with on researching some social experiments, I saw there was one where they had this like shock machine, and this was like in the 80s, and they had like
yeah.
this little like crappy recording. And I think the Stanford prison experiment is probably a really good one. But this one, they were like the shock levels went up. It was just a switch, and they had an actor in another room that was tied to a chair, and they would let them know, hey, there's another person in that room, and whenever he gets a question wrong, you're going to shock him. But each time he gets one wrong, after you shock him, you have to go up a voltage all the way until the end of the board, until all of them are cleared and all the questions are answered. And he goes, okay. So the actor's sitting in the other room, and you see a bunch of people go up and go, okay, sir, I'm going to read you off this question. You're going to give me the answer. And if it's wrong, I'm going to shock you. Do you understand? The guy goes, yeah. Yeah, like just screaming from another room. Yeah, he can't see him. There's nobody, like there's a person laying there, but he's not tied into actual electric things. And
Yeah.
he goes, "What is the color in this picture?" And the person goes, "Blue," and it's green. And he goes, "Okay." He's purposely getting them wrong. He flicks the switch, and it doesn't do anything. It just makes a noise. And then all he hears the guy go, "Ow!" And then towards the end of the board, like about six switches in, he starts going, "Stop, stop. It's hurting me really bad." And he's like screaming like bloody murder, like he's going to die if the dude flicks the next switch. He flicks it, and all he hears the dude start screaming like crazy. He goes, everyone kept like they would stop and be hesitant, which gave me faith that people actually give a shit about other people, no matter if they
Yeah.
can see the person or not. And they go, keep going with the questions. And he goes, that dude's dying in there. I don't want to flick the rest of the switch. He goes, keep flicking the questions. And the guy's like, And he's like, all right, sir. And he reads the last question, reads the next question, flips the switch again. Dude gets it wrong. And you hear the dude scream. He goes, look, man, somebody better check on him. I don't want to be liable for, and that's how they talk. It's like, somebody better check on him. I don't want to be liable for this if this whole thing goes sideways. And he goes, look, we're going to take all responsibility up. And he goes, you're going to take all responsibility up? And he goes, we're going to take all responsibility for whatever happens. Keep continuing with the questions. Do not mess up this study if you want your money. And the guy goes, at any moment, they could have got up and left. And they asked him at the end, why didn't you just get up and leave? He goes, because you told me I had to do it. He goes, so you're listening to something. How many times, if I told you to jump off a bridge, would you jump off of a bridge? He goes, yeah, but it's part of a study. He goes, exactly. Just because someone has what seems to be power or what seems to have control, do they actually, and you building it up into your head, seeing that there's no other option, there's only one way out, and that is continuing with what is going on. And I saw that. I was like, that's fucking fascinating, because how many people do exactly what someone says, all on the basis of they have more power? The teacher, it rationalizes my childhood of telling my teacher no all these times, like the power of control. Then get out of class. Okay, then what's the worst option? They're gonna call my parents. My parents are like, why? And I'm like, because I don't like someone telling me what to do.
That's Rob, there's so many things that I could touch on with that, but
tell me I'm crazy. I don't care.
Well, no, see, I think you were a rebel right from the beginning, which is great. I mean, the education system is tough because it's when you touch on that, because there needs to be a modicum of control in the classroom or there'd be chaos. But at the same time, it's the way that they did it. A lot of times, like when I grew up, you didn't actually need any qualifications as a teacher. You just needed to know a little bit about the subject you were teaching, because they thought, well, you're teaching kids. You know more than the kid. You can read a textbook, just read it the night before and then talk about it, kind of thing. So you didn't need any training on actually how to teach. A lot of professors in university have no qualification in teaching whatsoever, but they're really good in their topic. So here you have somebody who, because they know it really well, and they're exercising their control over the class because they're going, well, I know what I'm talking about. And maybe the way they're doing it is a bit off. And then when you get into the experiments, like where I grew up in the middle of Canada, we had this, you could probably look it up if you want. We had this we call it a mental hospital. That's what it was. That's what we all knew it as.
Now?
It was called, we knew it as Svetch, which was the Souris Valley Extended Care Hospital.
That's a fancy name.
But exactly. But we knew and it was right on the edge of town. And man, you talk about like ghost story, horror place with, surrounded by, it was trees, and it had tunnels connecting it to other things, because you didn't have to go outside in the winter and stuff. But they did the first LSD tests in North America.
No shit.
There. Yeah. And I found this out through a very weird, I was catching a taxi in Vancouver, and the cab driver, this is, older guy, long hair, beard. He's wearing a cowboy hat. He kind of looked like the actor who was in Kill Bill. They're out who buries her. What the hell was his name? I can't remember. See, I'm losing my mind. See, not important.
He's in a lot of Tarantino films.
Yeah, but it's that guy, where he wore the cowboy hat and stuff. But just imagine him, he had the longer hair, and
Bill's brother.
And, yeah. So the guy's like, so where are you from? And I'm like, I'm from, Saskatchewan, Weber, Saskatchewan. He goes, me too. And I went, really? And I go, yeah. He goes, yeah. He goes, I was one of the first people they tested LSD on in the hospital.
That's not.
And this is where, and so he had some stories to talk about that, where they were bringing it in, because imagine they're bringing in this thing that, of course, now we know what it does. Like if somebody says LSD, you get these pictures in your head, you know what I mean? Like when somebody talks about tripping. But here they're introducing this thing where these people don't know what it is. And this is the 50s. This is like, there was no psychedelic things really that there were, but like peyote and all this kind of stuff when you get into it. But when they talk about like marijuana, that's a different type of trip altogether, kind of thing. So here they're bringing in LSD, and they're going to, these are people who are taking it. Some were taking it willingly, some were not. Some didn't know they were taking it, so they were test groups. And I caught a cab with this guy maybe 6 times in the entire my entire time when I was, and every time that we got in, he would go, "Hey, how you doing?" And he'd remember me, remember who I was, and then we talk a little bit more about his experience in this place where I grew up. And when you're in a place where you kind of wonder what the hell happened. Like where I grew up was a place called Weyburn, Saskatchewan, population 10,000 people. Used to have a whiskey distillery just outside it. It had the largest inland grain terminal in North America. It was all this here. There was the largest wire producing plant in Canada was at this place. And the city was like, and it was, they called it a city. It was 10,000 people, but so it's right in the middle. And there were so many things wrong with this place. So many things. Highest teenage pregnancy rate per capita of anywhere in North America.
Damn, they got
Highest drug rate.
fertility.
Highest drug rate per capita of any place.
Sperm
Highest price
strong.
of produce. Well, yeah, highest price of produce, but the drugs, you could get any drug imaginable in this place, because what would happen is, when you think about it, from a logistic point of view, if you're a drug shipper kind of thing, you bring it in on the coasts, but you don't move it straight from Canada, whatever, into the US. You drive it to the middle of buttfuck nowhere, and then you go through if you've ever been to a border crossing in like Wisconsin or something, where it's just, you're in this town that's like population 100 people, and you got some guy in a booth going to the States, okay, got any ID, but this is back before you needed passports or anything like
I
that.
have a
You
question.
could just, yeah,
You said like highest teen pregnancy, right?
yeah.
But you said butt fuck. So can you get pregnant from the butt?
See, that's the secret. This is why certain places are having problems. They don't understand how to. So, but I remember talking to a small aircraft pilot who that was the other thing. We had an RAF base. So Canada was still part of sort of like the UK then. And so the Royal Air Force had like a training facility just outside our town. And this guy who flew Cessnas said, he said, "Have you ever looked at Weyburn from the air?" And I said, "No, I haven't." And he said, "There is this dome, this grayish dome that sits over top of the town, and you can only see it from the air. It's like this entire place is encased in badness and sadness and whatever's happening, because it's one of these really weird places. It's a weird place to grow up. So like as I was saying, like when you have all these, you had like not just you had the teenage pregnancies, but also suicide rates very high. You had the drug rates very high, and you kind of go, it's 10,000 people, why is all this shit, and you had all these things that were there, and all these things closed down. The whiskey distillery closed down, the wire producing plant closed down, this closed down. There was all these things that happened, and you kind of go, what was happening? Like, is this tied into the tests? Why did they choose to test? And it also makes you wonder, did they extend the tests outside the hospital? Like, did they drug the water supply? One of those things you could think about. Like, did they do that to the town to see what would happen? Because this is where they were doing the tests, and this place is literally right beside the. So those are things that I would think about. You know what? I don't think about that often. It's interesting that you talk about it now, because I think back and I go, yeah, I didn't think about those things until I moved away, where I go, yeah, I kind of wonder, because it doesn't actually have that much effect on me now, but I wonder if it did then. Like, I wonder if there were tests going on then.
Probably.
Where probably that's the thing. And the very strange thing about the Souris Valley Extended Care Hospital is I remember getting tours there when I was a Boy Scout, and we would go to the hospital, but I cannot remember ever seeing a patient or a doctor. When they used to bring us around to like rooms, like these empty rooms, these huge empty rooms, these huge empty halls where you'd see beds and you'd see all this stuff, but I never saw anybody. And I knew in a place of 10,000 people, I knew no one that worked there. No one. And it was just one of these really strange things. I mean, one of my best friends used to live literally 100 yards from the hospital. And I'd say to him, I'd see cars there all the time and the things, but I knew, and maybe somebody who was visiting, but I knew nobody that worked there. And it's one of those conspiracy things where you go, so what were they doing there? Like, what did they actually do there? And the only thing I knew for certain was that they used to house the criminally insane there. In like, so a lot of the criminal, like if Charles Manson would have been sent to Souris Valley until the I think it was until the 60s. I think there was some time in the 60s where they changed the law where they got their sort of their own institution where they separated the criminally insane from the insane, or what they would call the insane. So the criminally insane got their own like special place. But what ended up happening was the population of our town decreased by 3,000 people because they shipped out all these criminally insane people. And I remember thinking as a 12-year-old, 3,000 criminally insane people were just like 200 feet away. And no, we didn't know. The only thing that changed for us was our population went down. And you kind of go, what? It was just so nuts. It was just so crazy.
I want to touch on the psychedelics thing because I think
Yeah.
from listening to my show a lot, you probably, at least in somewhat, respect my opinion on some things.
Yes.
If I had to give you my guttural feeling, and I've been talking to a lot of people with the psychedelic stuff, so I've been getting a lot of perspectives when it comes to trips and all this type of stuff. I don't think it's like when people say it's a plant that reaches you to God or DMT. I think it just has a
Yeah.
certain effect on your brain because every trip I've heard, I can probably find something where someone said that to them when they were young, and your brain's just kind of remembering it like a nostalgia thing, but it's using it because it's the best thing that speaks to you. I talked about plant perception for a very long time. I didn't know that. I thought the program had died. They just failed it. They just were like, no, it doesn't, it's not going to work. Turns out there's a whole research study that has been actually seeing plants and now realizing that they're communicating through their mycelium, being able to send nutrients back and forth. So maybe they don't reach what we deem as our basis of intelligence is what we see as talking, breathing, functioning, that type of thing. But there's might be another level of intelligence that plants have, and it's just not seen as active under what we consider active. So I look at that, like I go psychedelics, all these things. I don't think they're anything that reaches you to another gateway or reaches you to what God is or reaches what this is. I think it's a way of it's not spiritual. I understand the connection to it where people are like, well, it's a spiritual experience. I think it's more of what it can do to your brain, much like Advil can make it seem like your back doesn't still hurt after you take a couple. I think it's just doing
Yeah.
something that's helping you prioritize a lot of things into your head. I don't think it's a plant from God. I don't think it's anything like that. I think there's just a different stimulant chemical. I mean, when they discovered coffee, for instance, caffeine makes you wide awake. Caffeine makes you pumped up. It's not a,
It's
it's not
considered a drug. It's a drug.
it's it's actually probably more dangerous than LSD. They're starting to do studies with spiders, and they tried to test if a spider could still do its web after giving it a bunch of
Stop, stop,
drugs.
stop, 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 stop. I do not want to see a
Well,
caffeinated spider. Those things freak me out
the funny
anyway.
thing is,
That
when they gave it caffeine, the web couldn't catch a bug. It was all sporadic and it was just
yeah,
unintelligible, like some type of what we would
yeah,
consider meth a person would make. But then they gave him like a bunch of drugs when it comes to LSD and all these things, and they're like really complex, but also like very weird and very creative or very like different from the original. Didn't really have a functional purpose. It just looked different. And they start to see like, oh, the most legal drug is the most dangerous, and that's caffeine. You know, when you do a cut from caffeine, you can go through withdrawal. Some of the times people need that
yeah.
coffee. But when it comes to like the story of coffee was apparently from like in Ethiopia or some other place out there, Ecuador or something. There was a goat that was eating these beans off of like, I guess one of the coffee beans, and he was jumping around. A farmer started to notice that all his goats were acting sporadic. And then he realized to put this into like a drink and eat them, and you could chew them and you could get caffeine from it and get this all energy and become accomplished or successful or whatever Starbucks motto is.
I mean,
And you
yeah,
start to realize maybe it's just the effects that it has on our brain. And it's not like the spiritual thing, but you can lead you to that. I mean, psychedelic or psilocybin mushrooms are becoming legal. They're starting to use them in depression studies. Now, they go, the only thing that's holding it back is that people still commit suicide even after taking the drug. And I'm like, well, if you have a thought in your head and you're already depressed, you're already suicidal, you can't rely on a drug to be able to fix that. So they go, well, the drug made them kill themselves. That's not true. A lot of times it's just like it works for a lot of people and it doesn't. Sometimes the depression doesn't go away. Sometimes the suicidal thoughts don't go away. But now you have distorted perception that you feel like you can actually do it. There are plenty of times that I've gotten high in the past and I've grabbed an oven tray straight out of the oven and I've just grabbed it without any gloves. And I started walking to the table to go put it down like a Thanksgiving. And as I'm placing it down, I'm like, my hands are really hot. And I set the tray down and I look down. I was like, oh my God, that just came out of the oven. And then the pain registers in my brain, but I'm so high, my distorted perception. If I was sober and I would have grabbed it, I would have known and dropped my hands immediately. But I lost the connection to my hands. And you start to realize, like, I think it distorts. Like, there's a very interesting argument with a guy named Michael Pollan, who also studies like peyote and all these things. And he said something I don't necessarily agree with, which is the fact of like he believes that peyote should be strictly for only Native Americans because it's helped out their culture so much. And I'm like, yes, but it is something that can provide beneficial use to everyone. That's like, I mean, there's no different from saying you can't come in here because you're this ethnicity. If you're saying someone can't use this plant because it's not part of their culture or their heritage, it's a plant, it's an item, it's meant for it. You think a giant creator that created these things would be like, I only want this to be for specific people? No, he wants everyone to use it in a beneficial way. Now, the issue I would say to tackle out of that is find a way to make it so people are seeing this as more beneficial, like the Native Americans that he said should only use. But it might be a different argument. But I look at it at a concept of why are you going to restrict something because you say it means this much to someone? But isn't like the main thing of like if you have two apples and you see someone starving, wouldn't you want to give them an apple? It's not taking a culture, it's sharing. There's Justin Bieber got dreads and everyone's saying he's taking culture from African American people. And I'm like, and Willow Smith, or was it Jaden Smith, whoever, Will Smith's son, commented and said, nice
yeah.
dreads, bro, like supporting his friend. And everyone's giving him shit saying he's appropriating a culture. I'm like, the gladiators had dreads. It was a sign of dirty hair back in the day. Like, why are we saying that this culture is only limited to one thing?
If they,
We
yeah,
don't. Well, Bill Burr has a joke. He goes, "You don't yell at like if you see, you don't see someone skateboarding and go, hey man, you're appropriating white people culture. Oh, you don't. Nobody does that. But you start to realize, like, are we just building this up into our head and we're just taking it a little too far because we feel like we've been robbed from so much? And I think what we've been robbed from is the aspect of our own lives. We're not being robbed from someone seeing a benefit or taking something else another way and getting some fun out of it or getting something out of it. When I see someone that's playing tennis or I see someone that's playing basketball and they're taking up my space, or in a bowling alley, if someone's taking up all the lanes and I can't go bowling, I'm going to be mad, but I'm not going to be like, it's offensive to me because they're not giving me a spot. It's all about not having a spot or feeling like you're going to be lost. Like I mentioned, being in a crowd of people where nobody knows your name. Nobody wants that to happen to them deep down. And I think that's with this whole cultural appropriation, all these things going. I don't see a whole lot of like whatever social media is broadcasting to everyone saying that this is offensive, this is offensive. Is it really? Or are you just mad you didn't get the opportunity or you didn't get the shot? I start to look at, like, I know that's going to be a heavy topic, but banning something saying it should only be for Native American people because it's a drug that's beneficial to their society, will find a way to make it beneficial for everybody as well too. It shouldn't be restricted just to one, like give some of the land back, give all this. What are we talking about here? Why are you blaming people that are being born now for acts that happened 200 years ago? I start to look at it like, are we ever going to progress? As there's not a race, there's just people. Like, we're whatever gender you want to be. I don't give a shit. You're a person with thoughts and emotions and creativity, a working heart, working lungs. That's my main thing I'm trying to focus on here, is that people want to pull the racial stuff out of it. I'm like, it's not about even race. It's about that we're a human species that is working somehow magnificently compared to what it could be when it's global demolition or whatever. And everyone wants to pick fights. And I'm like, look, just be happy that there's a plant that we could all experience together. We got something to learn from everybody. It's not specifically like this person doesn't agree with me, so I want to cast him out. Understand that everyone is an information tool and an education source. You can learn from everything by having talks and having discussion and realizing that we might have a lot in common, but our differences will bring us together.
Absolutely fantastic. I mean, it's strange that, one of the things you said when you were talking about, cultural appropriation, like nobody says to the Williams sisters, you know, you've appropriated, a white, like very, like, look at where tennis came from kind of thing. You go, it's very prim and proper and very white when it started kind of thing. And nobody says to them, you shouldn't be doing this because there's not, and it's almost ridiculous that you would bring that up. And you also make an interesting point where, we're still talking about, again, we're tied to the past where we're talking about the, where you got to move past that point. Because if you don't move past, like, yeah, shit happened, but change it, like move forward. And this kind of ties into what you asked me, right? I love the way that the cyclical conversations, you asked me in the beginning what the butterfly means on my tattoo, and what the butterfly means to me is my connection. I'd lost my connection to the magic of the universe. And if you want the magic of God or the universe, or however you want to put it. And for me, a monarch butterfly, even as a child, symbolized that to me. And so when you get into, when we're talking about LSD and hallucinogens, and I believe that what ends up happening with these things is, with our brain, what ends up happening is you take a hallucinogen and it starts to drop some of the barriers that we put up on our brains, and we start to experience the magic that's always been there in our head. And for some of us, it's very overwhelming because we don't realize how many barriers we put up. And so when you all of a sudden, when your brain all of a sudden starts to imagine or says, this could happen, this could be a thing. Although, when you talk about, like, people have said, the drug killed him because he stepped off a building because he thought he could fly. To be
That
honest,
happened in my town too.
but it's one of those things where you kind of go, it doesn't happen a lot. So if this person thought he could fly, there was, as you said, there was other stuff going on there. There was, if somebody says, oh, they killed themselves because of the drug, no, there was other issues that were there. The drug may have possibly amplified some of that, or it might have, what ended up happening is that what can happen is you feel so good and then you don't feel good. And when you come down, that the low is twice as low as what you were feeling. But the people who think they can fly, well, and hey, yeah, maybe there was somebody who thought they could, and so they jump off a building because they think they're a bird. But I believe that, these hallucinogens and things are allowing us to experience things that we're denying ourselves. And for some people, it's almost painful. It's so bright because you haven't realized how much you've been putting yourself in a box or doing whatever. And not that I'm not the actually the perfect person to talk about this, because it's been quite a while since I've done, anything, like that kind of thing. And but I have, so I could, done a few I can say I've, I inhaled, I guess. Is that how you could, is the term the presidents would use? Yes, I inhaled, kind of thing. I think it was Clinton who said that. But so when you tie into all these things, and I think it's all these things that we as a culture, we as people, I think we've been denying ourselves a lot of the potentials of what could happen. I think we're forgetting that, uh, as you said, why don't we just move forward? Why don't we move forward? Because I think we're quite comfortable where we are, even though there's a lot of fighting and there's a lot of stuff. There's, what's a change is painful, change is hard, but we got to change. There's got to be, shit's got to change. We can't, and we're actually, some of it is changing, but in this really weird sort of, you get the Cosby's being lit off, you get this being lit off, things are becoming so PC that, comedians are offending everyone left, right, and center. You know what? Every bit of humor offends somebody. That's the whole point. The whole point of humor is us usually laughing with and at something else. That's what's funny, unless you're into like the Jackass. I have to be honest with you, I don't find that stuff really funny. I look at it and go, I go that, to me it looks painful, and to me pain isn't funny. But there's other things where you can look at it and go, but if they're goofy enough to do that, that's funny. Like if they're idiotic enough to do that, I just look and see the results and I go, ooh, ooh, ow, ooh, so, but it's the whole slapstick, Stooges, pie in the face, getting falling off a ladder, pardon me, falling off a ladder, doing all that kind of stuff, where if you look at those things and you go, wow, that must have hurt, but it was fucking funny. Where but I can't watch shows like Jackass where it's just constant buffoonery that gets people hurt. I just go, there's certain
their own.
To each their own, exactly. And that's what I appreciate about you, and I appreciate about is you don't push your
stop. No more compliments, please. Thank you. Let's just move
I'll
on
give
to
you that
the
one. Yeah,
great grand scheme. The world is amazing.
Well, and then so let's go back to, I mean, you were talking about the CIA stuff and the changes. Does that has reading some of that stuff changed the way you think?
No, I always knew that somebody's probably doing something they shouldn't be doing, and the factor of it would be called research or beneficial or societal standards or concept of reality or I like taking PCP with my underwear. I don't know. I look at it like you got to expect that somebody's doing something, that there's a voice in your head that tells you this is something you should do, but it's the worst possible thing. Your conscience comes in. I think the government's like, fuck the conscience. Let's figure out what that is and see how far we can push it.
Yeah. So you're like, okay, you realize we probably shouldn't be doing this. And then somebody in the room goes, and that's exactly why we should.
Yes, exactly.
And
Because someone else is going to be thinking the same thing, but they're going to do it. So we got to do it first.
We got to do it first. And that's that whole, let's do it first. And you go, and you go, this, this is going to be painful. Yeah, but it'll be funny. And you go, hey, there's something there. There's something there. And you go,
I also saw that Mark Zuckerberg, Jeffrey Bezos, and Bill Clinton were all attending a summit, and there was an issue that they had to be delayed on their flights because there was too much air traffic going to the same summit. It was like a giant conference at a summit in a fucking mountain where I'm like, 3 known villain type characters. That's their thing, is we're going to go to a environmental event about the climate of the earth. I'm like, no, you're going to go in there, walk into the back room and talk about how you're going to keep conquering the fucking world. This is just a perfect place for you all to meet together.
These guys are our Batman villains. I mean, they are if they're getting together, they are Lex Luthors. They are, and it's the way that our cultures come about. It's very easy to label these guys as villains. Do I know? I don't know. I have no idea. There's certain, if you, as you're, any conspiracy person can point things and go, look, see, this makes sense. This, and they do, from a certain perspective. And then somebody could go, yeah, but look at it from this way. That doesn't make sense at all. And you go, yeah, but I don't want to look at it from over there. I'd rather look at it from here.
You gotta look at it from both. Gotta look at it from both.
Yeah. And so that's the thing. But that's actually what makes the whole puzzle. Like if you can look at it from here and look at it from here and then go, okay, now we got a 3D image, because looking at the flat image of the villain is like, and then you go, aha!
Maybe I have multiple personalities, because whenever I start saying something, like I made a couple conspiracies on the show, and then like as I'm saying it, I'm trying to make sure I can make it very convincing, and then like I'm believing it, and then in the back of my head you go, yeah, but then there's this and there's this, and my brain's trying to solve those issues, but also still trying to. So I'm constantly, when I'm saying something, I'm always thinking of the other perspective. So there's another, I think it's 2 personalities mixed into one person, where it's like, hey, but if you say this, then it's going to be this, and I'm like, I understand all those things, but let me just get this point out, and then I can come over to you and you can take the microphone for a minute. It's left brain and right brain.
That's the whole point. And it's actually, and it's very good come around or bring around to like when you're talking about pharmaceuticals and hallucinogens and things, because a lot of times what'll happen is it can either make those brains in your head that going, hey, you know that thing that you've always, hey, you know that thing you always wanted to do, let's do that. And you're like, because you have that part of your brain that goes, you know, that would be really dumb, let's not do that. So hallucinogen comes along and goes, hey, you know, hey, you know, hey, conscience, you want to go for a drink? Yeah, let's go. And off you go. And then and you're left, the person that's left minding the fort is somebody's like, okay, here we go, this is
Time
gonna
to
be
wreck
awesome.
shit.
Yeah, exactly. And at the same time it's like, well, no, I don't really want to break something, but oh, let's see how far we can bend it. And you get, and it's just, and it's that whole thing about, I think we as a people, we as a culture, we've forgotten to uh I don't think we experiment much with our emotions anymore, kind of thing. And we don't really like, we're told what happiness is and what sadness is and what love is and what all this. And there's books and self-help this. And it's like, I'm amazed by, even though I'm not a parent myself, but the amount of like parenting books there are. And because the whole point of parenting is you learn as you go, kind of thing. And, every parent will tell you, yeah, I got a couple books, they didn't help at all because my child was different than the ones that are in this book, but they can give you ideas. So we have all these things that are telling us how we're supposed to be. So we don't really experiment with what else could something be like, where, you know, and I find that really sad, but what do you do? How do we change it? How do we get out of that kind of thing? And this comes down to, I think to when you're,
Hurry up, we're hitting the 2-hour mark
no,
here.
yeah, I can't think of it. So I'm just, yeah, I think my brain is going to shut off. But that's for me, I don't think we experiment enough with our stuff, with our feelings. We're letting the world tell us what we're supposed to think and what we're supposed to think, which leads into the conspiracies and stuff where you go like, well, am I letting this person tell me how I'm supposed to be or how I'm supposed to do? And then you see the rebels out there who are just, you're kind of doing your own thing. But you look at them, and some of them, you look at them and you go, well, I'm not a big fan of that guy. He's doing his own thing, and it's just, he's annoying. And you kind of go, well, no, he's not annoying. He's just doing his own thing. He doesn't give a shit about you. And that's what's cool. And you go, well, no, I don't think he's cool because he doesn't give a shit. And you go, yeah, see the circle? And you go, okay, I get it. And that's where we're at. I think I don't want a bunch of us to run around and start not giving a shit about anything anymore, because that's part of our problems is,
Would it
if
be
we
any different than what we're doing now? That's the true
exactly.
question.
You got to shake the pot. You got to stir up. I mean, that's the thing. We got to, and going right back to what you said, we got to start thinking about change. I mean, because if we're so focused on what's behind us, like 200 years ago,
Am I
and
promoting
not,
change on this show? I hope I'm not doing that.
no, you would never promote change. You suggest it, and then like a conspiracy theory, that change could, you know,
We got to wrap it up, Casper.
I think we do. I think, man, I love these shows. They make my day.
I'm
Holy
glad
crap.
they make mine too. Mostly because we could talk for 2 hours and I don't remember anything we said.
That's it.
Hurry up in the last minute.
Edit that.
What?
No,
What?
nothing. Just no.
You threw
No,
me
I
off.
just.
What are you doing now? Are you doing a bit?
No, I did a thing. No, I did the hand thing because I'm surfing. So you might have to. So
No, I don't know. I have my. I'm Italian. I move my hands around. What are we saying here?
No, close it off really quick. Everybody, you know what? If go out, see if you can do something different today than you would normally do. Listen to that voice in your head that says, "Wouldn't it be cool if we kind of did this thing?" Ignore the voice that says
Jump off a
that
bridge.
might not work. Yeah, no, let's not do that unless the bridge is not really tall, and the only thing you might do is like twist an ankle or something.
For the TikTok.
For the TikTok. No. But yeah, do something different. Just one thing. That's all you need to do. And then you could maybe see if that works. And maybe tomorrow you'll try 2 different things.